I remember still in December you were writing about the Marshall Plan on Ukraine. So how do you assess it? Was this just an idealistic idea which didn't work, or you still can be in how it developed?
All my hopes in the West and Western behavior and Western support for Ukraine were and are more or less disappointing. Marshall Plan, it somehow happened because Ukraine gets some promises and I hope concrete funds, but the real one I hope will be organized after the war with Russia, and maybe also after your war with corruption, which is your second biggest challenge. And because this is the argument they used to use. They don't want to spend their money when they don't trust oligarchs. They don't trust after what they've seen after Orange Revolution. I support you strongly, but whenever I talk to the journalists, politicians, NGO activists, this is the main thing they used to do. They do.
I mean, we're following you're addressing this issue as well, that somehow Putin got a big support of the European far right. How it happened and what the impact it has to the whole situation.
This is strange. This is something really surprising because, suddenly Ukraine is a fatherland of international nationalism. And on the other hand, this is the biggest contradiction. The really nationalist parties, which are very strong, like Jobbik in Hungary, which got more than 20% of votes in last election. Ataka, there is also very successful French National Front. They are really nationalist parties, and what they do, they support Putin. So you have something like a new Comintern or Nackomintern or something. And you have your own nationalists who are part of the government, part of the coalition. I'm talking about Svoboda. But for me, I'm a leftist, so I can be really honest in this case. For me, it's totally understandable because we had our nationalists in solidarity. When there is a time for the fight for democracy and independence, everybody are together. Nationalists, cosmopolitan, leftist, rightist. It's totally understandable. So you have, of course, people on the left, mostly American intellectuals, and politicians from the left, mostly from Germany, who created strange coalition, pointing all the time the question of nationalism in Ukraine. I called them Putin useful idiots in my New York Times column last month.
How this but of course. So what would be the impact after the elections of this, and what can this EU elections to the European Parliament, how they can matter?
European nationalists will have 15, maybe 20 votes, the 20% votes, which shows that EU is maybe the big problem. I mean, for them it's a big problem, not necessarily for Ukraine. And your nationalist parties are actually very pro-European, and you cannot say the same thing about nationalists in the EU. This is full of paradoxes. Full of paradoxes.
What to do with these paradoxes?
First of all, you have a Russia problem, and nothing will be so important for now as Russia. And then we can talk. But this is the thing, and unfortunately, no one will fight for Ukraine. Never anyone fight for Poland. Don't think that never in Polish history no one died for Poland, and never no one will. Exactly, it's the same with Ukraine. And I hope there's not gonna be the open war.
And interesting enough that it wasn't not that relevant when there was just Maidan, when we talked last time, but now with also this anti-American sentiment and the way you play it, you hear it a lot, that European left are actually also kind of gone in this streak of the fascists and also anti-Americanism. How you treat that, how to build a discussion. I mean, if you talk to the liberals, they will say America want to drag us into the war, and it's really got to this pattern of West against East imperialistic America, US war, Afghanistan, Iraq, all that stuff.
This is another paradox, I'm sorry. The story is based on paradoxes. The same people in America who are accusing Obama and this administration, and Republicans who are even more for Ukraine, that they are thinking in the Cold War terms, or they wanna, drag USA into a new Cold War with Russia. The same people are using Cold War arguments, because what they say, well, USA has its own zone of influence, so Russia can have also. Then they say, we shouldn't provoke Russia, so it was a mistake that Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic are in NATO. These are the Cold War arguments. So they people like, Cohen in The Nation, which was very good, respected magazine, the biggest left-wing weekly in America, and now they are like, I don't know, Putinist or someone. But of course, don't worry, it's not a mainstream, and also the biggest, names in the intellectual left also in America, like Michael Walzer or Tim Snyder. They of course wouldn't say any of this kind of stupid thing. We are still, struggling, explaining, in Europe, in America. So, but it's surprising, how many, Putin's useful idiots are.
But I mean, it's how to fight Putin useful idiots, not like to fight, but what to do with that, how to build this. If it's all paradox, maybe how to start from a different point.
Well, of course.
What is the narrative to build?
Your job is to, keep an eye on everybody, so not to have any accidents, like, any nationalist or like anti-Semitic, nothing like that. But to my understanding, this is what Ukraine is doing. It's like, you're totally okay with this. I haven't heard about any, wrong moves. Actually, I think I'm even doing better than Poland. I remember 1918, I was a child, but I remember that there were some anti-Semitic incidents. I can't, maybe I'm not well informed, but this is your job, okay? The job of the people who are international supporters, like Team Snyder, is to explain, to talk, to open eyes for Ukrainian history, Ukrainian situation. Your government is pretty well perceived, like Yatsenyuk has, people from all the sides. I haven't heard any critic of him, even in Ukraine.
How did it influence, because what we also heard from a lot, that for the quality papers, the intellectual, the people like Team and all these kind of people, they're well informed, what they write, it's actually up to the point, but you have a tabloid media and you have somehow like a public opinion, which isn't really like television, which neither in France nor in Germany, or even in some of the EU countries, not anymore in favor when this discourse of Maidan had changed.
Martin Simečka said that 60% of Czechs followed what happened in Ukraine, which is a good amount, surprisingly good. People generally don't care, and especially about the international relations. But almost the same amount of Czechs didn't know who is the victim, who is the perpetrator, who is who in Ukraine. Which means that it's really not, maybe press is talking a lot about it, but people really don't know how to understand it. This is a problem, but okay, but this is with everything, it's like that. Tabloids are, bullshitting about all the topics, not only about Ukraine. And I'm sorry, I don't have a solution for it.
When you talk about the Marshall Plan and still like hope, so what it should be? It just money, or what is that? If we still maybe discuss it, I think maybe this word is not.
Actually, okay, sanctions were like false moves. Something like there were not real sanctions. Europe. People were dying here. More than 100 people died with the Ukrainian values in their mouths and in their slogans, okay? And Europe, it's so disappointing because first they didn't want to even pay, significant price for Ukraine, like they paid for Poland and other countries. And, Ukrainians are the same people like Poles. Then, when they realized that they cannot really even, defend Ukraine in any way, even clearly invite to Europe, and Russia involved, Then they started, to manage their conscience, at least paying something. So this is partly your Marshall Plan, okay? And then I understand that, your path to Europe will be supported financially. The aim of Putin is not necessarily to catch a part of Ukraine, to grab another Crimea. Probably what he wants to do, because he realized that even people in the eastern Ukraine are also Ukrainians. They did also polls, public polls, surveys, social surveys, like they did in Crimea. They realized that Ukrainians are there, and even not every Russian wants to go to this kind of Putinist Russia. So what is the aim? Make Ukraine, show that Ukraine is not a serious country, that it's a dangerous country, it's a different country. Something is happening here. No one knows who is who in Europe, but everybody knows that something is strange in Ukraine. So we don't want to risk to have this country in the EU. This is the problem with Putin. Putin accepted it before a year ago, 2, 3, that Ukraine is somewhere in between, okay? And he probably wants, again, at least Ukraine to be still there. This is what Ukrainians did not accept. They want to be regular Europeans as well.
What would be the things to watch? To watch, and the challenges you would see, the main, I even say, not distraction, but threats so far from Ukraine?
Our talk is pretty simple because all the answers I can really give you will begin with the word Russia. Okay? Russia this, Russia do, Russia will, and so on. Because this is the situation now. I tell you now, I can first aim is to handle with Russia. Second, with corruption. Third one would be your memory. Revenge. We had a horrible problem with revenge. However, in 1989, when Polish transition and way to Europe began, we didn't have 100 people died, when Poles were shooting to Poles. We had it before, in 1980, 1970. What happened in Maidan is comparable to Gdańsk in 1970, when almost the same amount of Poles were shot by soldiers, Polish soldiers, communists. But we had, for 20 years, from 1989 almost until now, big discussion about agents, illustration, who is, post-communism, decommunization, after 20 years after the collapse of communism. So I am afraid what kind of discussion you will have, how this nation will be divided, okay? And also the third thing would be your discussion about your own history. With Poland, it took a lot of time to accept that we were also not only victims, and you had also history which has some faults of Ukrainian nation, to Jews, to other nations. But it's your case. No one would do it for you. But it's gonna be way ahead. But these are the problems of free country, and I just keep my fingers crossed. I almost broken them for Ukraine to be country full of problem of normal country.
And what would be the lessons of illustration at this point, and this kind of reconciliation and the memory? What do you think in Poland should have been done differently, might have been
Well, Poland has one success and one probably defeat. We are still divided as for communist martial law. Half of the nation supports martial law. And half of the nation says that it was the big treason. So totally divided nation. But one thing is good. We dealt with our anti-Semitism, which was a huge problem in our history. And we had a big debate about it, a horrible, strong debate, very hot one, the largest debate in the modern history of Poland. And I would say that more or less we get it right. So you cannot be a serious politician, serious journalist, anybody serious, and say something even with a small suggestion about anti-Semitism. We also, look at our support for Ukraine. Of course, we are so pro-Ukrainian because we are afraid of Russia. Not necessarily we love you so much. Poles were enemies of Ukraine very often. We were occupying country for Ukraine also in our history. So there were a lot of bloody war. There was Volhynia when Ukrainians killed a lot of Poles, and Poles killed also a lot of Ukrainians in revenge. So our history is bloody war. Poles loving Ukraine than Ukrainians loving Ukraine. Sometimes you can say, like, public polls shows that more Poles want Ukraine to be in EU than Ukrainian want Ukraine to be in EU. I like it. I mean, I can say that I'm first time maybe in the last 20 years I'm really proud of my nation. I like to be Polish now when I'm in Ukraine, okay? Because usually I criticize my country. But this time they're okay.
Finally, like, what you found yourself new in this information war? Like, because some people said, like, it's not the usual kind of propaganda. It's a bit different.
Well, first time, everybody are surprised how strong is, and not strong, how strange is Russian propaganda. People say that it is worse than in 80s and in 70s. Like, that they are really, like, surprising second thing is Russians like it. 80% of them support Putin. Putin has bigger legitimization in this society than any other European leader. Can you imagine? Like, there is no politician in Europe who would have 80% of support. This is really dangerous, okay? So it's not a war with Putin. Unfortunately, it's a war with Russians also. My heart is bleeding because I love Russians. I hate Russian state, but I love Russians. And and the second thing is that how weak is European, not propaganda, but like message. Homo Sovieticus is alive. Homo Europeicus is, hesitating. People are disappointed here very often in Euromaidan because they were waiting for the support for EU, and the support came, but it's not the support that you would expect really. Ukrainians deserved for more.
Very shortly ask you, do you think you also get tricked? Because we talk all about this 80%. Do we really know?
About?
The 80%. We all talk about this 80% of Russians supporting Putin. But like, when you think about that, aren't we really just repeating somebody's idea, so we taken for granted that they are 80?
Unfortunately, I think this is true because they were, Memorial and Centrum Levada. They are honest institutions. They are not connected to Kremlin. And they checked it. They are good sociologists. And unfortunately, they are probably right.
We can talk longer, but of course it's